going to go through and give you a lot of information and a lot of tips for how to actionable tips for how to navigate your burnout, as well as some next steps and resources that can help you. Today, we're going to go over an intro for myself, as well as specific, what is burnout? How does it work? How do the dynamics of burnout affect both your body and your brain, which is a part of your body, and your mind? And burnout affects the body and the mind differently. And so when recovering from burnout, it's really important to understand the differences between the two, but also to learn how to listen to your body a bit more. One of the challenges with burnout is that people don't come into touch or contact with their bodies and really kind of deny the reality or the challenges for one's body and the stress that's building up in one's body. And that disconnect between mind and body really exacerbates burnout and makes it worse and makes recovery more difficult. So we'll go into, again, the specific causes of burnout in both body and mind, and then 3 steps for recovering, and I'll share some resources afterwards. So my background is 10 years in advertising, marketing, sales, entrepreneurship, and agency life. So I started at Microsoft. I was an advertising account manager there in the Bing team, and really got a great taste for validation for my hard work. Really rose through the team that I was on at the time pretty well and became a go-to resource, and really got, again, this taste for working hard and seeing results from that. And so after 3 years, I left Microsoft and co-founded an ad agency, and ran that for about 6 years, and then ended up burning out and shutting down the agency and shifting to work for another agency for about 8 or so months, managing a team of 40 there, and ended up starting to burn out there again. But thanks to supportive people in my life and the experience of going through one burnout, started to catch the signs and actually take action to shift out of that. So I shifted from marketing and sales into burnout, quarter life crisis, and career coaching. And so now I'm writing a book on burnout, quarter life crisis, and self-development. I'm doing a lot of research with people. You may have seen that the survey, if you're following my blog or social, that can help you evaluate your level of burnout or quarter life crisis. Getting research to help people understand the dynamics of what's happening in challenging periods like these. Also doing a lot of work coaching people through these periods of transition and helping them to understand actionable, specific things that can help them move through these challenging periods in life. And that's something that's really important to know, is that in burnout, you can almost feel hopeless or helpless even, where you're just so stressed, you're so tired, your mind isn't working properly, and then there's a biological outcome of chronic stress buildup. And so it can feel like you're just peering through a thick fog, like there's just nowhere to go, and that you may never recover. I remember that feeling very well. Several days that were particularly difficult. And the good news is that burnout is something you can recover from. It is something that is not permanent. You're not permanently damaged from burning out, but it is important to catch it and take it seriously and start to make changes in your life to be able to recover. Burnout can happen more than once, and it can prolong. So it's very great that you're in this webinar here, and I definitely encourage you to not just let this be the only step in your recovery process. So burnout, there's a few different ways to identify it, but the quote unquote gold standard for measuring burnout is the Maslach Burnout Inventory. This was developed by Christina Maslach, who is an occupational researcher, and she identified that there are 3 main criteria: exhaustion, particularly with regard to emotional exhaustion, reduced efficacy, so your productivity falling, and cynicism. Depersonalization refers to a feeling of things not being real, like you're robotically going through the motions, like you're kind of watching someone else's life through your own eyes. So that's the attitude side of things. So exhaustion and efficacy these will go worsen as chronic stress starts to build up in your body. And if you don't process and allow it to release on a regular basis, then those two are going to happen. And the cynicism is a really sinister side of burnout. When your attitude starts to fall, then your likelihood of seeing the situation for what it is and addressing it, starting to make changes, is also impaired, because you get the sense of, well, I'm just stuck in this. There's nowhere for me to go. It just is the way it is. There's no place for me to move to a positive direction. So these three components, these three criteria really play a central role in burnout. And you can use the MBI, or I use the Oldenburg Burnout Inventory, which is a free tool that you can use. MBI costs money to do, but you can use these to answer a set of questions and evaluate what's your current level of burnout. And so that's important to give you the facts and the data to say, wow, this is, serious for me. The World Health Organization in 2019 elevated the status of burnout. Didn't quite call it a medical condition, but said it's a syndrome, a collection of symptoms. And the World Health Organization draws on these three criteria as the definition for burnout. So burnout happens along a continuum, and we'll get into the different stages of burnout in a few slides here. But some of the symptoms that happen as burnout progresses begins with, you might have a sense of irritation, resentfulness. You might have sticky stress, where stress that doesn't quite go away day in, day out. You get stressed out from something at work and it stays with you all day, into the evening, into the next morning, into the next day, and even on the weekends. That can be a sign that you're not able to detach from work, and not being able to detach from work is one of the things that really powers burnout, not allowing your body and brain to rest. And sleep issues are probably a more early stage casualty of burnout. You may be insomniac ultimately in the end, or the later stages where you just cannot fall asleep because your mind is racing, thinking about all the things that are happening at work. And that absolutely is a sign of burnout. And also, sleep is one of the most important things for resolving burnout. If you're not getting good sleep, it's going to reduce your ability to process and release stress, and it's going to reduce your cognitive performance, and it's going to reduce it's going to cause you to be more cynical and more frustrated. And so sleep is a cause of burnout and a casualty that happens as burnout sets in. So measuring your sleep is one of the most important things to pay attention to and to ultimately fix. I do have in the resources a burnout recovery guide. It goes through 3 steps, and in that is a link to a list of tips that you can use to improve your quality of sleep. I know it can be very difficult when your mind is racing to just be able to shut it off, but there are several different things you can do to improve your quality of sleep without having to rely, let's say, on sleeping pills. Next in the symptoms of burnout comes fatigue, exhaustion. You're just starting to get really tired. Your productivity falls. Matthew Walker is an author and neuroscientist, author of Why We Sleep, and he goes into in-depth detail about sleep and how it affects our mental and physical health. Stress also really affects our mental and physical health, and that's one of the key central points of burnout, when you can't process the stress that's building up. And so when you're not sleeping as well, when stress is building up, your efficacy at doing your job goes down. Matthew Walker says after 50 hours about of work per week, productivity goes down. And one of the tricky parts of burnout is that it thrives on denial. So we'll go through the stages, but one of the stages from the person who coined burnout, Dr. Herbert Freudenberger, is denial of emerging problems, where you say, it's not that bad. Yeah, but I just need to get things done. I can sleep when I'm dead, mind over matter, no pain, no gain. I can survive on 5 hours of sleep, 6 hours of sleep. you may be able to survive, but your wellness, your quality of survival is going to be significantly impaired. And actually, you can have serious health issues that come from not sleeping enough. Ultimately, if you don't sleep enough, you can die. So don't take sleep lightly, and don't take your ability to just push through pain week in, week out, month in, month out as a granted. It's not. Your quality of life and your quality of work will suffer the more that you just keep pushing and pushing and pushing without allowing your body to recover. So your productivity goes down, your creativity, your ability to learn goes down, your ability to just think, it goes down. And you might start to have light withdrawal from your networks. You might say, well, I can't make it to dinner because I've got to get this done. Or you might be at dinner and you might be opening Slack or email on your phone, just trying to catch up on work, withdrawing from the people around you that are important to you. It's a sign of burnout. You might start to get sick as well. This is your body trying to signal to you something is wrong. When the stress is really building up, it becomes chronic. Then you might start to get a cold every so often. You might get a sinus infection, an earache. You might have aches and pains. One person said that she had a slipped disc one day. And these are all signs that your body's starting to break down. Now, granted, they don't mean that you're burning out, but in taken together, if there's a constellation of health issues that can point to a burnout happening or worsening. So listen to your body and understand when it may be signaling, especially if you've been healthy normally. Headaches, physical clumsiness can set in. So for instance, I remember in the thick of my burnout, I was just knocking over glasses. I'd reach for a glass of water and just spill it. And then of course I would get really pissed at myself and beat myself up like, oh my God, I'm this bad. What's happening here? But still the denial was there of like, well, I can't let go of work because, and we'll get into the mental narrative side of things, because it's kind of all I have. That's where I feel validated. That's where I feel like things are going okay. That's where I have control. That's the mental side of things that prevents you from enabling and allowing yourself to rest, to recover from the impact of stress. So physical clumsiness is a sign that you're going too far. Brain fog, you just can't remember things, is a sign you're going too far. Anxiety, negative attitude, when you're being not just lightly disengaging with your network, but antisocial. You're actually avoiding people because you're just too tired, you can't deal with it. Signs of burnout. Ultimately, in the later stages, you just get the sense of numbness. There's two stages in the 12 stages model. One is inner emptiness and the other is depersonalization. It's the sense that nothing is real, nothing really matters. That's when you know burnout has really gotten to a serious point. Depression can really set in there as well. And then you can have more serious medical issues, cardiovascular issues. Stress ultimately kills 120,000 people, or is related to 120,000 deaths in the US every year. Depression is related to 88,000 deaths in the US every year. This is not just mind over matter, and this is not just a mental issue. It's a physiological body issue as well. And in the full later stages of burnout, you can actually physically or mentally collapse. And unfortunately, that's what pushes many people in the advanced stages to recover. Their bodies basically just give out. Their emotional resilience just gives up, and they don't care anymore. That's actually what happened to me in the later stages, where somebody quit on the team. I stepped in to take over, and after 2 weeks, I just thought to myself, I don't care anymore. I don't care if all of our clients fire us, if our whole team quits. I just do not care anymore. I would actually feel relieved. That's a signal of a later stage of burnout. So there are other health issues. I'll go briefly to this that can be in the constellation of symptoms that are related to burnout. You may have inflammation of your body. You may have depression, insomnia, cardiovascular issues like heart attack or stroke. Adrenal fatigue is something that it can also happen in relation to chronic stress buildup. So it can be like a sibling symptom of burnout. And then chronic fatigue syndrome, ME, that can be another serious issue that comes from just elevation of chronic stress elevation of stress to a chronic level over a long period of time. So briefly, burnout, depression, exhaustion. Exhaustion is where your mood is more elastic. You get some rest and some sleep, and you feel better, within a day, a couple of days. Exhaustion is a physical issue, and when you're exhausted, you feel full confidence that if you get a good night of sleep, you're going to be fine. Burnout and depression, on the other hand, your mood is less elastic. It doesn't snap back to being less cynical very quickly, especially with depression. Getting rest and sleep brings slower relief in burnout, and for depression, it doesn't really bring relief. You can be constantly sleeping without it recovering your energy levels. Burnout is a mental, emotional, and physical issue. Depression is typically a mental and emotional issue, and this is drawing from the work of Dr. Herbert Freudenberger, the scientist who coined burnout again. And in depression, you just feel like you're giving up, like there's just hopelessness for recovering. But in burnout, you have the desire to recover, but you may have some confusion as to what to do, how to recover. So that's a little bit on the differences there. So before getting into the causes of burnout, I want to touch on some myths. Burnout is not necessarily just a one-time thing. It can reoccur. Burnout doesn't just last days or weeks at the later stages and middle stages. It can last for months. It can last for years. It can last continuously over a period of years. It's not just a mental issue. It's a mental, physical, emotional issue. It's not just caused by work overload. If you're feeling cynical, like your life is like you're not sure what you're doing with your life, like you're going in a wrong direction, like you don't have, like you're feeling very alone or lonely, or like your relationships are falling apart. You can also burn out from non-work issues. And if you're understimulated to a significantly negative degree, that can also create a form of burnout in the cynical side. If you love what you do, you can still burn out. There's a bit of defense against the cynicism if you love what you do, but if you're overwhelmed by work, burnout is a stress-related issue. And so you can still find yourself in stage of burnout. Again, burnout does not mean that you're damaged goods, that you cannot recover, that you won't be fine again. Everyone absolutely can recover from burnout. High performers are not immune for burnout, and they're actually one of the most at risk of burnout. High performers are used to just pushing through the pain. And so if high performers don't know their limits or get in touch with their bodies, then they can push past the point that their bodies are able to sustain. So high performers are quite susceptible or high achievers to burnout, as well as people that really feel compelled to give and to support others, and perfectionists. In changing your job or taking time off from work will not in and of itself resolve burnout. Definitely many people that burn out do choose to take time off, to take a break to just take time off from work and take 3 months off. Many people will choose to change their job, but some of the roots of burnout are related to narratives that tend to build up and become overstrengthened after our formative years into our adulthood, even later into adulthood. And so if you don't get to the root of those mental narratives and integrate and resolve those, burnout can regrow. So I like to think of burnout in resolving it in terms of 4 R's in 2 stages. So burnout is a body and mind state that happens after you just are chronically pushing with insufficient rest and recovery. And that often happens because you have insufficient reward from your work or your life overall, and or you have an insufficient ability to regulate or manage the workload that's thrust onto you or that you find yourself in. And the reason I break this out into 2 sides is where to focus on with regard to recovery versus prevention. But these 4 Rs play out in a negative cycle that is also related to the 3 criteria of burnout. So if we encounter issues regulating our workload, or if we don't feel like we're getting enough validation, reward, then we're going to work more. We're going to rest less. And that affects our level of exhaustion. As we feel more exhausted, we're resting less, we're recovering less, our efficacy decreases. And that causes us to feel the need to work more. And that causes our level of performance to fall even more and become cynical.
Is that karma
Let me
a bunch of them?
Yeah.
Scam.
Okay. And so that all plays out in a negative feedback loop that can lead to or worsen burnout. So burnout plays out across 5 stages in the simplified model and 12 stages in the full model. It's easier to talk through the 5 stages and conceptualize that, so we start there, but I will link to the 12 stages model, and that's where you can really get a lot deeper into the nuances of burnout. But burnout on the simplified model starts with a honeymoon. This is where you're enjoying work, you're eager to prove yourself, to work hard, you're passionate, you have high energy, everything's going fantastic. And eventually, as honeymoons do, that period ends and you start to get into the stress onset. This is a natural part of any commitment, any engagement that you have, relationships, new places that you're living, work, school, anything will really go through the honeymoon to the, okay, things are not as terrific as they were at first. And in the stress onset phase, you still find that work is rewarding. You still find that you have energy, that you want to work hard, improve yourself, but the stress is starting to settle in. And again, that's a very natural part of any part of life. And stress in and of itself is actually not the problem. It's not bad. I'll cover this in the next slide, but stress is actually really important to us, to enabling us to navigate life. It's the level of stress that's the negative thing. We need just enough stress to motivate us, but not too much and not too little. So this is the U curve of stress. You really want to be at this motivated level. And when you have too much stress, when you can't control the factors that create stress in you, when you don't know how to cope with stress and how to process and release the stress from your body, then you start to feel fatigued, exhausted, health problems start to come in. And this is what ultimately leads to burnout. I won't spend much time here, but on the lesser end of things, if you have too little stress, you may feel cynical about what's the point of life. And so depression can, be one of the things that come in from that side of things. And you just won't have enough stress or motivation or tension to help feel like you're growing and progressing. But stress is actually not the problem. Stress is important here. It's just the management of stress. In fact, Andrew Huberman, he has a podcast, he's a neuroscientist, and he talks about the cortisol pulse, which is something that at the low point of our sleep cycle, we start to produce the stress hormone cortisol, which helps us to wake up in the morning and to have energy throughout the day. So stress is not the enemy, it's management of stress that's the challenge. So the inflection point is when you get to the chronic stress phase. And if you don't learn how to navigate chronic buildup of stress and move back to the stage 2 to stage 3, then you inflect and you start to be, by force of behavior and routines, pulled into burnout, which can ultimately end in or get to a habitual burnout level where you're just constantly burning out, going through really bad stretches of burnout, recovering, back into bad stretches of burnout, recovering. So the chronic stress phase is the inflection point, and that's where stress is past the healthy level. Your emotions become harder to manage. Your sense of reward, validation goes down. Your exhaustion goes up. Your attitude diminishes. Your productivity diminishes. And the inflection point here is if you deny the reality of what's happening and how stress is affecting you, that's when you are going to be pulled deeper into the burnout cycle. So at stage 4, burnout, you are past your limits. Your mind and body has become affected by stress to the point where your ability to think critically and to step back and see the bigger picture and to consciously understand what's happening is gone, or it's not all the way gone, but it's very much diminished. And so it becomes harder to see the truth of things. You feel like you're in survival mode. You may equate working with surviving. And if you stop working, you may feel like, I don't know, am I going to be okay? Will I survive? How will I pay bills? How will I navigate life? So that's yes, thank you. I'll send this out afterwards for recording as well. So you're in burnout stage, you're past your limits. And if you don't start to make changes, then the denial will worsen. You will lose more conscious control over your decisions. You'll start to go into automated survival mode behaviors. And so absent any help from other people or changes in your situation, like for instance, your job changes or you lose your job or you have a health issue that pushes you to realize, oh, wow, I need to recover here, then your momentum is apt to carry you into stage 5. And in stage 5, habitual burnout, this is where you feel trapped. Your ability to help yourself is really all but gone at this point. Your risk for serious health issues is significantly elevated. And again, that's what may force many people at this habitual burnout stage to recover. They just get hit with something that's so bad, so negative that it wakes them up. It makes them realize how bad things have gotten. So these on the left here are some of the stages of the 12 stages of burnout, and they help you understand how you progress through this. So at first you have this compulsion to prove yourself. You want to work harder, and that's actually fine if it's done from an intrinsic standpoint, rather than I feel like I need to work harder to prove myself. I'm not enough if I don't work more. That's the more negative, the narratives that are going to push you deeper and deeper into burnout if you don't resolve those. So it's stage 2, the stress onset. If you neglect your bodily needs, your mental needs, if you revise your values so that you can make more room for work and your time goes more and more to work, that's what pushes you into the chronic stress. If you deny that the problems that are coming up are real, if you start to withdraw from your networks, that's what pushes you from chronic stress into burnout. If you start to feel numb, if you feel like things aren't real and you just keep robotically doing the things that you've been doing, that's what pushes you from becoming burned out into habitual burnout. And again, that's when you're at risk for serious health issues. So where do you start with recovering from burnout? If you are actively burned out, so stage 3.5, 4, 5, you want to focus on rest and recovery, body first. If you're trying to prevent burnout, you're in stage 3, 2.5 to 3.5, you have enough mental bandwidth to focus on the narrative sides, the mental, emotional side, to the reward and regulation. We'll start off with the body side. So burnout, well, going back a little bit, our minds have advanced very rapidly. Society has advanced extremely rapidly, but our bodies are still built and wired with old survival systems made to keep us safe when we were hunter-gatherers, or when we were trying to defend the village against barbarians invading, when life was constantly a state of danger and our bodies needed to be able to react immediately to stress because it meant life or death. Our bodies have not caught up with the evolution of our minds in modern society. So for the body, the stress response system is a survival system. It just means when you feel stressed, your body is actually activating the same circuitry that helped you to escape from the predator thousands of years ago. There is no, well, stressful day at the office mode for the body. There is no, I just had an intense conversation, but I'll be fine. I'm not going to die. The body treats all stress as stress, and all stress to the body is survival oriented. So that's the crux of the issue, is that the body is using, because if you don't know how to regulate your stress, reduce your levels of stress, stress is only a temporary thing. It's only meant to help us survive. And so if you're over reliant on it or you can't get out of stress, that's what breaks your body down over time. Our bodies are not meant to be constantly in a state of survival stress mode. So you may have heard this triune brain. And where we think, where we operate most of the time when we're not so stressed is the executive higher brain, the prefrontal lobes, the prefrontal cortex, the executive brain, the human side of brain. That's when you're actually thinking rationally, and you can have access to your higher thoughts, your creative, critical thinking, and think, do I really need to send one more email, or can this wait? But when you're in a state of stress and you're not going to be thinking so clearly, the executive top brain operates, it gets signals from the body last. It's the slowest. It's the most powerful, but the slowest. So when you're feeling more stressed, then you're operating more with the middle and the lower brains, the emotional brain, the mammalian or limbic system. It's not just one part of the brain that's responsible for your emotions, but the structures in your brain that are governing your emotions will react faster than thought. And they'll think, am I okay? They'll think fear. They'll think anger. They'll think, I'm not safe. Or they won't think, they'll feel. And those will drive us to do behaviors. I have to send this email because this client is upset and I don't want anybody to be upset with me. It's going to affect me negatively. Immediately you act, you don't think as much. And when you're really stressed, you go down to below even the emotional state and you're just operating from a survival state. I've got to do what I've got to do to survive. So this is just a picture to help you understand that your higher rational thinking mind is slow. It doesn't operate well in stress. The lower, more reactive centers of the brain will react more in the stress state. And that's why it's hard to think about how to recover from burnout if you've been chronically stressed for a long period of time. That's why it's important to address the stress so you can actually access those higher levels of thinking. So Amelia and Emily Nagoski, they're authors of this book called Burnout. Great book for understanding the body reaction to stress. Briefly created this infographic based on their insights. How do you process stress? So they popularized, not invented, but popularized the sense of this idea of a stress cycle. A stress cycle is the full cycle from when you get stressed to you process and release the stress. And this is supposed to be what happens on a regular basis. It gets broken though, and that's the issue. So number one, the stressor appears. You get a text from your boss or an email from an angry client. Immediately, automatically, your brain sends a signal to your body to get into the stress response mode. So that little almond thing there, that's the amygdala. It's usually cast as the brain structure that initiates the stress response mode, sympathetic nervous system. And that floods your body with all these reactions like stress hormones, your heartbeat elevates, you get ready to fight or flight, or ultimately freeze if your body thinks that that's the best way to survive. So then the stressor is handled, it disappears, maybe the meeting is over, and you think that, okay, I'm all good. Now I'm set. But what doesn't automatically happen is the deactivation of that stress system. Your body doesn't realize the meeting is suddenly done and it's time to just chill and relax. Your body needs certain bodily cues that it recognizes, that speaks its own language, that tell it things are fine, stress, survival situation done, I can chill. And that's the problem here. And so once your body gets the signals, then your rest and recovery system is activated. That's the parasympathetic nervous system. You can calm down and repair the damage that happened from stress and keep the stress from getting to a damaging level. And then you're ready for another cycle of the stress cycle. So the issue is in stage 4. Your body is wired based on old survival needs. It doesn't know how long it needs to be in a state of survival to escape the predator. All it knows is if I don't keep pushing, then I'm going to die. And over time, natural selection really honed in this stress response system, prioritizing short-term survival over long-term well-being. Because if you don't survive, then there's no point in being well long-term. So that's the machinery that we're operating on. So the only way for the body to realize things are okay and to shut off that survival mode is if you use the stress or if you reduce the stress using the stress. So this is literally, if you, after a stressful meeting, if you just do some jumping jacks, 1 minute of jumping jacks, you move your body, you do some other exercise, you go for a walk, that allows your body to use the stress that's been built up in it. And then it knows, okay, now we're using this. Now, at the end of this, I'm going to be safe. The issue is if you just sit in your chair and you have the meeting and you're not using your body, you're talking, you're thinking, the body doesn't really speak that language. It doesn't understand. So it keeps the stress system activated and doesn't process the stress because it's like, am I still in danger? I don't know. And if you think about it evolutionarily, other things that can turn off the stress response system involve, after you use your body, cool down, go for a slow walk, breathe deeply, do some stretching, do some yoga, spend time with people you care about, hug people, even singing and dancing or laughing or crying. These are things that are activations of your body in ways that it recognizes I'm safe now. So it's not enough to just work out and use your body, because that is also a form of stress. You need to cool down after that. You've got to stretch, you've got to relax. The reason is because evolutionarily, you're not going to start slowing down and stretching, spending time hugging other people, laughing with other people, doing yoga if you're still being chased by the lion, if you're still fighting to survive. So that would happen historically. People would survive, they would start singing and dancing, like, praising the fact that they were still alive, or slowing down and resting and recovering. But that doesn't happen now. We just keep going from one stressor to the next. So unless you do something your body recognizes as a cue to deactivate the stress response, then you're still going to be stressed. It can build up chronically over time. And that's, again, what is a major factor in contributing to burnout. So the good news is that it's very specific. If you do these things regularly each day, like taking 3 deep breaths to your stomach, that will help you come back from burnout. It will help you prevent burnout. It's just important to make sure that you build in these actions into your regular day, into your process, in order to help you relax and process the stress. So doing some meditation, each day, spending time with friends, doing something other than working, which can elevate your stress, is important to enable your body to process the stress and not get to a chronic level where burnout starts to set in. So once you have addressed that, once your body is processing the stress and you're able to start tapping into your higher thinking, then you can tackle the deeper root of burnout. What got you into a place of not allowing yourself to rest and recover in the first place? So there are narratives that build up in us, usually from our formative years, that drive us to do certain behaviors. So these are things like, I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy enough. I'm not productive enough. If I don't do anything in a Saturday, then I feel like, what am I doing? I'm wasting my time. I'm worthless. I can't give myself permission to slow down. I can't allow myself to ask for help because that would prove that I'm weak, that I'm not enough. I'm afraid of disappointing others. I'm afraid of failing. I'm afraid of leaving this job because that would mean that I fail. That would mean that I'm not okay, that I'm not enough. I'd be admitting that. I have to control the outcome here. I've got to achieve. I've got to become something. Otherwise, I'm not okay. These are the narratives that push us to work past the point of healthy work levels, that healthy optimal point of the stress curve. These are the narratives that push us to work so hard that we burn out. And generally, they come from psychological survival or continuity. It's an internalization of fear, of guilt, of shame. That growing up, for instance, maybe your parents said, life is all about working hard. I have an immigrant parent, and for immigrants, it's a lot of work is surviving. If you're not working hard, if you're not going to school, if you're not getting to the next level, if you don't have enough money, you're not going to survive. So there's a fear, intense fear that gets built up around that. And so it's, if I don't work harder, I won't be safe. It may also be guilt. If I don't put everything out there and I don't help this person on my team and put out that fire and pull out this other one, I won't be okay. I'll feel like I didn't try my best, or I'll feel like I let other people down. If I don't work harder, I won't be accepted by anyone. How can I look my friends in the eye when they have awesome jobs and big houses and tell them that I'm just a senior on the team when they're directors and VPs? I won't be accepted by my community, my tribe, the place that I want to be accepted. So I've just got to keep working. Those are extrinsic motivations that drive us to work, but they're not intrinsic, and that's the challenge. Part of resolving burnout involves shifting the reason that you're doing things from feeling fear, guilty, shameful, and pulling it in towards yourself and deciding what you really want to do. We'll get into that in a little bit here, but for now, just note that narratives that are pushing you to work harder and prove yourself, they're based in survival. They're probably rooted in your childhood, your adolescent years, your early adulthood, and they are part of the problem driving you to burn out. Lack of regulation, ability to regulate your workload. So these narratives are also around, fear. I've got no choice. Or ultimately, you may just feel kind of helpless. I don't have any alternative. I've got to pay the bills. I can't find another job. I can't find another job that'll pay this well. And I can't decrease my salary. I don't have time to take care of myself. It's not for me. It's for others, for my kids, for my future kids, for my lifestyle, for my partner. I just got to get through this. I just got to survive. I can handle it. I need to handle this. If I slow down, I'll be seen as an imposter. One of the worst, the imposter syndrome. And it just preys on insecurities that come up in us that prevent us from seeing that we do have agency and choice. We do have always something we can do to help regulate our level of work and or regulate our stress coping outside of work. But these narratives are going to push us to keep working and not evaluate, not look around and see how can I navigate this consciously and with full awareness. So these narratives come from overwhelming pressure, and they cause us to assume that we can't ask for help. They cause us to avoid anything that feels uncomfortable. They cause us to deny what's going on and say, no, I can handle this. I can handle this. Everyone else is doing it. Why can't I? So they point to this idea, if I don't keep working, I'll lose what I've got, or I won't get what I want. And I'm just too stressed to figure out whether there's another course. So again, more narratives that are pushing us to burn out and not look deeply into the facts with the higher executive thinking brain and to react with the emotional brain. I can't deal with this right now. And that's what helps generate and worsen burnout. Briefly, as I see we're moving into the 3/4 of the hour, there are certain contexts that can raise the risk of burnout. So again, looking at this 3 criteria of burnout, toxic workplace, smack dab in the center. If you are in a toxic workplace or a toxic relationship, there is very little you can do to prevent things from your side of burning out from happening or getting worse. If you've evaluated, or someone else who you trust has evaluated your situation and says that is toxic, listen to them. Listen to them and figure out how you can get out of that environment. Very, very key to realize if you're in a toxic workplace that there's very little you can do to protect yourself. There are things you can do outside of work that if you just can't escape, you'll have to do in order to survive, but that's one of the worst. If you don't have self-care or other routines that help you to get enough sleep, to eat healthy, to move your body and be able to rest and recover, that's going to increase your level of exhaustion. That's one of the key criteria. If your workload is overwhelming, naturally, it's also going to be something that's going to elevate your level of burnout. If you've gone through a life loss, you've lost someone that's close to you, that can affect your attitude. And for me, what happened was my mom passed away the same month that I started a company. And over time, I didn't give myself space to grieve, to mourn. And I started to feel like the only thing I had in life that was worth a damn was work. So I poured myself into work. If you've lost someone and you don't know where else to turn, if you're feeling low self-esteem because your peers are all getting ahead, becoming senior directors, VPs, and like, if you've just gone through a significant rejection, or you're trying to date and you're just getting rejected again and again, those are going to affect your attitude. And work is one of the easiest places to go and feel like you have this sense of control, or like your effort will lead to rewards on the other side. But it's unsustainable. If you're just looking to work as an escape, it's going to elevate your level or risk burnout. So in recovery, 3 steps. If you are actively burned out, you want to address the body first, then you can address your narratives. And then it's very important to solidify sustainable changes, sustainable routines that will help to prevent a burnout in the future. So step number 1, sleep, the most important thing here. Not just sleep opportunity too. If you lay your head down on the pillow for 10 hours, but you're only actually asleep for 5 hours, you're not getting 10 hours of sleep. You're not getting 9 hours of sleep. You're getting 5 hours of sleep. Again, sleep is one of the things that gets disrupted by stress and burnout, but it's also one of the most important things. So if there's anything you take from this webinar that is a single action you can do, I beseech you, prioritize your sleep. You need to get 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep. Now, again, in the resources, there's a recovery guide that includes some tips for getting sufficient sleep, things like aromatherapy, like stretching and doing yoga before bed, like not eating 2 hours before you go to sleep, like getting sunlight into your eyes, or using a happy light, which is, you may see it on my face, what I use here to regulate your circadian rhythm. But getting enough sleep, 7 to 9 hours is essential. Under 7 hours, your body starts to break down from lack of sleep. 6 hours is not sufficient. Even getting 7 hours consistently is not enough sleep. You really want ideally 8 hours of sleep. So sleep is number 1. If you can take time off from work, that's also a high impact thing that you can do to enable your body to rest and recover from stress. People that I've talked to that have burned out, my own experiences, it can feel like, no, I can't take time off. I've got too much to do. All the work will pile up. And at the end of that time, I'll have so much to do, and it's just not even worth it. It is worth it. It's very important. When you remove yourself from the environment that's causing the stress, work, and if you don't look at your email and Slack and try to plug back in, your body starts to realize, okay, I can calm down. I'm not in the environment that's causing the stress. Again, the survival urge, I can recover. So if you're working the weekends, do not work the weekends. If you have the ability to take one personal day off, take that day. Do not work, do not plug back in. If you can take 5 days off, a full week off, 2 weeks off, if you can take 3 months off from work and come back, it really can be one of the best things that you can do for your recovery process. Nobody that I've talked to has said, I regret taking off some time and getting a break from burning out. Everyone feels better. It might take a day or two to unwind the tension that's been built up for so long, to unclench, but then you're going to be so glad that you did. So sleep, number one, taking time off, even if it's just the weekends, if you've been working weekends, really essential. And then complete your stress cycles. Getting body movements and going for a walk or for a run, plus a cool down, essential to do that cool down, because otherwise you're just leaving. Exercising and working your body out is a form of stress as well. So if you don't do that cool down or stretch, you can leave the stress cycle still a bit broken or not fully shifted out of. You can also do muscle tensing exercises where you, for 20 seconds, you just clench every muscle and you just really hard. I'm doing it right now. And then after 20 seconds, you release. That can be a way to complete your stress cycles. You can do 20 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, 2 sets of 30 seconds of that. That can help you complete your stress cycles. Spending time in nature, deep breathing, yoga, massage, going to a stand-up comedy, watching a comedy so that you're laughing, singing in the shower. These are the things that can actually help you complete your stress cycles, as well as spending time with people that matter to you, even with strangers or animals in person. One of the biggest challenges nowadays is remote work. We may work from home. We may not even leave our home and get into contact with other people, but our bodies need social contact, in-person contact. Zoom is not enough. There are differences in chemical releases in the way that our bodies and brains react when we're in person and we can be close with people that don't happen just over screens. So once you have recovered and have more access again to your higher thinking, challenge and change those narratives. So ask yourself, where did the need to prove yourself and work harder come from? What else in life do you enjoy besides work? What would you do if you were free from fear, shame, guilt? What are you going to think about this moment 10 years from now? What's the cost of not resolving your burnout? Be with these questions, journal on them, talk to your therapist about them, talk to other people about them. Just once you have access to your critical thinking, ask yourself these questions and honestly answer yourself. You can find a lot of key answers there. And if you don't resolve these narratives, you will continue feeling the compulsion to work to the point of burnout in the future. So specific things that you can do: therapy, definitely great. Developing accountability to making changes through coaching, definitely important. Communicate more. Over communicate. Be honest. Don't run away from the people in your life. Don't escape into things like drinking or partying or shopping just to get away from the feelings that you don't want to touch because they're soft or they've been repressed. Those are the feelings that are going to unconsciously project into your urge to work so much. So again, I'll send this out in the recording, but for sake of time, consider doing some of these things to help change your narratives. And then solidify new routines, changes. Solidify reflection habits on a regular basis. Accept that you have limitations, that there are times when you are pushing at your limits, times when you're pushing over your limits, and times that you're under your limits, and that you accept and give yourself permission to not always be pushing the envelope, always be going beyond your limits. That is not a sustainable mentality. And it does, again, contribute to what perpetuates burnout. Give yourself permission to prioritize your own well-being and health. You deserve it. You don't need to kill yourself for others around. You can't even help people if you ultimately let yourself devolve to a point that you have nothing left to give. Briefly, if you want to know about this, PQ reps, positive intelligence, those are that's like a kind of modern age for the workplace meditation, where it's like a little, it's like a gym for meditation, where 10-second reps is what Shirzad Shamin, who created that, calls it. It's like rub your index and middle finger with your thumb, two fingers together, with such intensity that you can feel the fingertip ridges. Do that for 10 seconds. And that will help you to calm down. It will help you to shift out of emotional reaction, survival reaction, into higher thinking. So in the moment when you're really stressed and you feel like I just got to do something, do a 10-second PQ rep, do 3 deep breaths, and that will be a routine that can help you navigate away from the danger point of burnout. New routines and everything that you can do inside of work. So these are things outside of work. Here's inside of work. Practice asking for help, saying no, drawing boundaries, manage what you control, delegate, learn how to delegate, learn how to reduce your workload, learn how to let go, crucial for your own mental health. Be more proactive about clarifying expectations or asking for clarity and expectations from others. Don't assume things. Raise concerns that you have. Learn how to compromise on work rather than just say, I'll do it, I'll do all of it with no help and with no shift. Give yourself permission to navigate in a way that prioritizes your well-being in addition to getting things done. And other things here. So lastly, my personal message to you, burnout is a calling. Burnout is a calling from within to come into deeper alignment with who you are beyond the expectations of others. Accept that you have limits. Value today, not only tomorrow. Let go of trying to be worthy enough. Understand what influences from your parents and society instilled burnout narratives in you. Let go of trying to please others all the time and perfectionism. Seek and understand the gray spaces in between the black and white. It's either this job or I don't survive. That's a black and white way of thinking. There are options for you in between that. Understand and look to those gray spaces and give yourself permission to discover the true you. It may sound cliche, but in the process of alleviating the pressure to burn out, that is absolutely what you ultimately need to be focusing on. So lastly, here are the 12 stages of burnout. As mentioned before, there's an article, if you search 12 stages of burnout, Gabe Kwakyi, you'll see that goes deep into this. And then here's some resources that you can check out. I'll send out the link to download this deck, as well as the webinar recording after this. Learnaboutburnout.com is a site I started to help share stories from people that have burned out, as well as to teach about burnout. And if you want to evaluate your level of burnout, there's a link here to do a self-assessment as well. Oh, and there's a self-guided burnout recovery plan. It's got 3 parts that can guide you through process of recovery. And if you would like to explore burnout coaching with me, I would be very honored and glad to support you in your journey. Thank you so much for attending today. And I wish you the best of luck, health, wellness, and connection with yourself. Thank you so much.